My name is Scout, and I am 9 years old. I live with my mom, dad, and little brother in Ayer, Massachusetts. Like most kids, I'm very curious. I decided to start my own show where I find out everything I can about everything I can think of. I call it Scout Finds Out. If you're curious too, this is the show for you. In case you haven't noticed, there's a lot happening with our government right now. A lot of it can be confusing, especially for a kid. On this episode of Scout Finds Out, I sat down with Massachusetts Congresswoman Lori Trahan to get a better understanding of the ins and outs of politics. Take a look. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scout.
So, why did you decide to run for Congress?
I ran for Congress because I really felt strongly that the country needed to go in a very different direction. I looked at Congress and there weren't enough women in Congress. There was only 19% women, and so we needed many, many more women at the table. And I ran for Congress because I have kids your age and Huck's age, and they needed we needed to ensure that they had a better future, that you have a better future.
So what exactly does Congress do?
Well, Congress does a lot of things. One of the things that's most important is they are part of the body that writes the laws for our country. So we debate those laws on the House floor. We have committees that we sit in, and we develop policy around areas that matter. I sit on the Education and Labor Committee. I also sit on the Armed Services Committee. And so we figure out policies, and we bring in lots of experts so that we write the right laws for our country.
What is a campaign?
A campaign is basically a job interview. So I knew I wanted to be the representative from this part of Massachusetts. It's called the 3rd Congressional District. And I knew I wanted to be the representative of this district because I've lived here my whole life. It's my home, and I wanted to be the voice of my friends and family and neighbors down in Washington. When you do that, you have to embark on a campaign, and a campaign is basically a job interview where you present your case to the people who get to vote, and then they either vote for you or they don't to be their representative down in Washington. I represent my hometown of Lowell, but I also represent cities like Lawrence and Haverhill and Fitchburg and Gardner and Marlborough and Hudson. And then I represent Ayer and Shirley and Groton and Dunstable and all the towns near there. 37 cities and towns total make up the district I represent. So I go down to Washington Monday through Thursday, and I work with all people like me who represent their homes, 435, and we work on making laws.
What does a regular work day look like for you?
Oh, it's very different every day. When I'm home in my district, I travel all over my district. I meet with people, I meet with maybe environmental groups who did some investigating and they think that there's a problem and they want me to look into it or be supportive of them. I meet with young people. I tell them about the importance of voting, registering to vote, and being involved in our democracy. I might meet with seniors to let them know that their Social Security or their retirement is safe and that I'm going to protect that. So when I'm in home, I travel all over the district and I have meetings. When I'm in Washington, I spend a fair amount of my time in big, huge committee rooms. People might be giving a hearing. We might bring experts in to learn from them. Other times we are writing legislation and we're debating that legislation and we pass that legislation. I take a lot of votes every year. I've already voted almost 265, maybe a little bit more than that, times on bills that I want to go to the Senate so the Senate can pass them and then they go to the President for signature.
Are you planning to endorse anyone in the 2020 election?
In the presidential campaign? I did. So I took office on January 3rd of this year. And in February, my good friend, Senator Elizabeth Warren, announced her presidential candidacy in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is right in the middle of my district. So I grew up here in Lowell, but right up the Merrimack River is Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a very cool, big city and with a lot of meaning. She actually announced her campaign right in the middle of where the Bread and Roses strike was, which was a big, huge worker strike that was led by women who worked in mills, and they weren't treated all that great. And I got to stand on stage and talk about why I support Elizabeth and why I think she's going to be a great president of the United States. So yes, I did that months ago, and I've also traveled to other parts of the country to talk to folks about why I support her.
I've met almost all of the main Democratic candidates running for president.
That is remarkable. I bet you're probably the most informed 9-year-old in the country right now if you've met, because even though some people are reading about the candidates, very few get to meet all the candidates. But because you live so close to New Hampshire, all the candidates are there. So it's pretty cool that you got to meet them.
Why are you in favor of impeachment?
Because I think the president broke the law. And I think that Congress has an obligation to make sure that no one is above the law.
Why did you and the other woman in the Congress wear white?
So the night of the State of the Union. So this is the 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote. And a big part of women getting that right was the culmination, or it was called the suffragette movement. And there were women, very brave and courageous women, who fought for our equality, and they fought for us having the right to vote, and they wore white. And so as a salute to them, my colleagues and I, which, I'll tell you, I serve with 130 other women in the House of Representatives and the Senate. We call that the Congress. That's the most number of women ever to serve our country in the Congress. And so we wanted to show our gratitude and our respect to those women who got us there 100 years ago. So we wore white like them.
What do you think is the most important issue to consider in the upcoming election?
Well, there are a lot of issues for us to consider. I personally, the environment is a big issue right now that we've turned our back from. And with this president, he's caused our environment a lot of damage. And I think when I think about my 2 little girls, and I also have 3 older boys, I want to make sure that our environment is safe and healthy and protected. I think about our economy. I want to make sure that every family has access to a job and to a good education and to a better life for their family. And I think that's a big part of what we're hearing about on the debate stage, is making sure everyone has access to we call it the American dream.
One issue that's very important to me is gun violence.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on gun safety policies?
Well, I probably should have given 3 reasons that I think this election is going to be about, because there is a lot of debate right now around what our gun policy needs to be. If I've been frustrated in my new job, it's because of this issue. We have a very, very simple bill that we passed right when we got elected, and it's making sure that everyone gets a background check. Nobody gets a gun that shouldn't have a gun. And it's pretty much a basic policy. I am supportive of many, many other things, from an assault weapons ban to red flag laws, which we won't get into all of that. But the very basic one, we passed the House of Representatives, and the Senate hasn't taken a vote on it. And so when I think about my kids, when I think about them going to school, when I think about my older kids who live in California and New Hampshire and in Boston, I think about their safety. And right now I can't ensure their safety because we don't have adequate gun laws. And so it's a big, huge issue that kids as young as you and kids as old as my kids are really fighting for, which is really good to see everybody, get involved in this very important debate.
Does being a congressperson help the president?
Sometimes, yeah. So many times in our history, and this is how it should work, members of Congress work with the president, and the president has a big, big team of people. They're called cabinet secretaries, and they oversee different agencies. And the way it works best is when we work together to come up with laws for our country.
So, what is the name of the place where Congresspeople meet? Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so one of the places where we all go to meet is on the House floor. And that's when we go to vote. We're actually only all together, like everybody, a couple hours a day. And that's for us to go cast our vote. I have a card, and it's called a voting card, and I put it in a machine, and I vote yay or nay, which is yes or no, on the bill that's being presented. Other times I'm in a committee room, which is a big, big room, and they call it a dais, but we sit in rows, and I'll see not all of my colleagues, but maybe 30 or 60 of them, depending on the size of the committee.
So, what is the difference between a congressperson, a senator, and a governor?
So a congressperson they have to reapply for the job every 2 years. So I got elected in 2018. I took my oath of office on January 3rd, 2019. And in 2020, September, we don't know the date yet, but in September of 2020, which is next year, it's not that far away, I have to run for re-election to get the job again. In the Senate, and our senators are Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. They run every 6 years, and they don't just represent 720,000 people like me. They represent the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yes, so they run statewide, and they run every 6 years. And then a governor also runs statewide, but they don't go to Washington. They go to Boston, the capital of Massachusetts, and they work at the State House. And they work on laws specific to Massachusetts.
What's the most important thing about being in Congress?
Well, I think the most important thing about being in Congress is making sure that you're representing the people who sent you there. You always want to make sure that you're fighting to make the lives better for the people you're there to represent. That's why I meet with so many people when I'm here at home, to make sure that I understand their concerns, their dreams, their fears, so that can inform what I work on.
What's the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part is, well, there's little hard parts, like I have to leave my family every week, and I have to get on a plane, and go down to do part of my job. And so, I miss my family, I miss my little girls, and so sometimes being away from home is hard. I ran for office because I wanted to help people, and I wanted to pass laws that made the lives better for people that I care about. And right now what we're working on is very different. Right now, some of what we're having to spend our time on is this impeachment process of the president, which is a very important part of the job. In the Constitution, there are articles on what Congress needs to do. Article 1 There's Article 2 that kind of spells out what the president is supposed to do. And then there's Article 3, which lays out what the Supreme Court's supposed to do. And so every time I'm in Washington, I'm mindful of the fact that I have to defend and I have to uphold the Constitution. And that is a very important part of the job. But I wish I didn't have to do that, because I wish there was a president in the White House that didn't make us have to do that.
What's the best part about your job?
Best part about my job is that I get to serve my home. I get to hear what people care about, and I get to go fight for it down in Washington. And that's very rewarding. When you can help people, and when you can help people who really need help, it feels good.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scout. Will you stay in touch?
Of course.
Terrific.
Well, that's today on Scout Finds Out. Bye.